Hi, welcome to Enter the Bunker, where we launch you into thriving. Each week we talk about a different virtue that can be used as a building brick to build your own personal bunkers. We share personal stories, as well as tips and tricks to help you thrive instead of survive. So sit down, relax, and enter the bunker.
Hello and welcome to Enter the Bunkers part 2 of love. We're going to go over how to practice love. So we'll go over three ways.
And
then we'll talk about each one.
Okay.
So number 1, be willing to be vulnerable. What? That sounds bad. Okay, I'm curious. Number 2, be willing to forgive. And number 3, show unconditional love. All right, let's get into it. Like when I hear the word vulnerable, I don't think that is a good thing. So I'm curious what it's going to say.
Okay.
Yeah. So number 1 was be willing to be vulnerable. Being vulnerable can be scary, but it can also open yourself to the deepest connections with other people. In effect, by being vulnerable, you are saying, here I am, this is me. Do you accept me for all that I am? When you are unable or unwilling to share your innermost thoughts and feelings, the connections you get will only be as deep as you allow. Okay. I'm starting to get it. So like, the more you let people, the deep as you allow, kind of like, that's when it sunk in for me.
Right.
Yeah.
And that means, because a lot of times when you allow people to know more about you, that's when you're vulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because then you're afraid they may reject you, right? You know, just like I said, it's like, here I am, this is who I am. And when you do that sincerely, when you do that with an open heart, as I say,
Yeah.
that's scary to a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that you're actually presenting you're really presenting yourself, and so it leaves you open to rejection.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times when you think about people when they go dating and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
they keep everything very superficial because they're afraid that the other person's going to reject them and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So but at the same time, even in our regular relationships, everyday relationships that we have with different people, how much you're going to be vulnerable with others in terms of telling them how you really think, feel, and experience and so forth is going to determine just how much of a connection you can have with people, because the more open you are, then the deeper the connection can be. Right?
Okay. My head's just going like this right now. I have no comments because my head can't process them. Anyways, I think so far we've only gone through one so far, but that's my biggest one I have to practice. Number 2, be willing to forgive. Forgiveness isn't about who's right or who's wrong. It's about letting go and allowing yourself and others to grow. No one's perfect and we all make mistakes. We all have weaknesses in order to move forward in your life and in love. These mistakes and weaknesses need to be forgiven or there will be no peace. We are always evolving. We are not the same people we were a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. We cannot cling to the mistakes of our past and carry them in the future. That's a good one too.
So yeah, when it comes to mistakes, weaknesses, it goes back to the vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be able to forgive those things which are not so hot, right?
Yeah.
So the things that we might have done things in the past, or and since then we've like grown up,
Right.
And so we just got to learn to be able to forgive those things. And it's not just something you do with other people. It's something like where you're forgiving someone else. You got to forgive yourself
I was
first.
just gonna say that. Like, what do you think is easier to do or I guess yourself, because it's probably different for everybody. But do you think it's easier for you to forgive other people or forgive yourself?
I think.
I know the answer for mine.
You mean personally?
Yeah.
Oh, I tend to be a very forgiving person.
For other people.
Yeah.
Me too.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases.
Yeah. And I feel like for myself personally, I'm not forgiving on myself. I'm so hard on myself. Like, why is that?
We're our own worst critic, right?
Yeah.
It's people oftentimes will be the hardest on themselves than they really need to be.
Yeah.
And it's probably because we know ourselves best.
Yeah.
Right. And there's always this and sometimes there's always that conflict where you feel like you could do better, and you're always kind of pushing yourself And when you don't meet that,
you feel like you let yourself down.
You feel like you let yourself down.
And possibly others. And maybe that's why.
And nobody really knows that better than you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we're like forgiving to others, it's often that we're almost trying to maintain whatever kind of an image we have in our own minds about who they are.
Right.
And sometimes you have to forgive those things when they trespass, you know, on that image. They don't actually, because you want to continue to maintain a relationship with them, or you want to continue to be able to think good thoughts of them, because you hate to, because even, you know, internally, you just hate the thought of like, you know, somebody would be, you know, that disrespectful, or somebody would be that, show that much disregard for XYZ.
Yeah.
You know, it's just the thought of people being mean like that, or like, just as an example, it's distasteful to us, right? So then it's easier sometimes to forgive it, but at the same time it's harder, because
deep down it's still there.
Deep down it's still there, and you want to, and there could be a part of you that wants to hold on to that, but just like all things, you got to let it go.
Hard. Yeah. But that's why we practice it.
Yeah, that's what happens with love.
Work that building brick. Build that bunker. Number 3 is show unconditional love. Unconditional love is love without any string attached. You do not want or need anything in return. You simply love and want nothing more than happiness, the recipient of your love's happiness and your own. Remember number 2 in this list, forgiveness. You can't love someone unconditionally unless your love doesn't change despite their actions. Continue to offer love and acceptance even if their choices and actions distress you. Until a certain point, because remember, you have to love yourself first. That's how I feel with that one.
Yeah, so unconditional love is probably a little more difficult. I mean, it's difficult for a lot of people because we have a kind of a tit for tat sort of a mentality sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, and for a lot of people, it's like, well, I'll do this. It's like, but, you know, you're going to give that back to me, or you're going to do something for me. Or some people just, you know, want to give that, like, show that connectivity as long as that person's going to be useful to them.
Right.
Right. Or something like that.
Ugh.
And yeah, there's some people in the world that are like that. And so, but if it's unconditional, if it's simply, you know, no strings attached, think about the love that you have for a child, right? Yeah. So if you can be able to extend that to everybody, then people feel that, and sometimes it'll get reciprocated, but at the same time, you'll have that greater connectivity. So all these things that we're talking about in terms of how to get more love in your life, by being unconditional with it, just free for all,
right? Yeah.
Then you will actually like expand your world in terms of like how much more connectivity you have with other people.
People will be attracted to that.
Yeah. So yeah, again, if you can be forgiving with them, then you can have unconditional love with them. Then certainly you'll be able to and then be vulnerable. Yeah. Do those things, get 3 things together, then you have something where you're going to be able to have like much more love in your life.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, this is something like, I mean, we're talking about like, we're coming up on Valentine's Day, and the first thing people think about is like, oh, who are you with? You know, that sort of thing, right? But the fact is that
we kind of said at the beginning, places, things,
ideas. You know, and so
like, I love that idea.
Exactly. We say that all the time, right? So the fact is that if you can practice these 3 things and apply them to everything you do, right? Be vulnerable. Allow yourself to have like, you know, deep connections, to be forgiving with others, and be forgiving with yourself, and to actually like just be unconditional with how you love others. Then you could just have a lot more love. Build that building brick. And build your bunker.
I love it.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us for part 2 of Love. We'll see you next week with Serenity.
We'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to Enter the Bunker. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, where you can share your story and also look at behind the scenes of how we make our podcast. You can watch the video version of this podcast on YouTube by simply searching Enter the Bunker. Tune in next time as we launch into thriving.